6 black vehicles, moving in formation down a residential street in Atlanta on a February morning. No announcement, no warning, just engines and presence, and the kind of stillness that falls over a neighborhood when something is about to change permanently. On the porch of the house, a man in a robe, coffee in hand, the posture of someone who had spent months making careful, calculated decisions and believed himself untouchable. He was about to find out what untouchable actually looks like. The lead door opened. A woman stepped out, burgundy dress, heels on pavement, long curls catching the morning light. She did not rush, did not look at him the way someone looks at an enemy. She looked at him the way someone looks at a problem they have already solved. He had taken everything from her, her name, her accounts. 14 years. What he did not know, what he could not have known, was that she had been found, and she had not come alone. She built him from nothing. 14 years. Every dollar she could find, every hour she could spare, every small thing she quietly gave up so he could have the next thing he needed. And then one Tuesday evening in January, he set a manila folder on the coffee table in front of her, sat down across from her, and waited for her to open it. She did divorce, bold, cold, first line of the first page. She looked at it for a long moment, then she looked at him, and what she saw in his face was not guilt, not regret, not even the decency of discomfort. What she saw was a man who had already moved on, who had already done the paperwork, who had come home that evening not to have a conversation but to deliver a conclusion. She closed the folder, set it back on the table, and said nothing. Because here is what Darius Calloway did not know about his wife. Simone Ellison had spent 11 years as a nurse at Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta. She had sat beside people receiving the worst news of their lives, and she had learned, through repetition and necessity, that the first response to shock is never the true response. The true response comes later, when the body has had time to understand what the mind already knows. So she closed the folder, and said nothing, and waited. But this story does not start on that Tuesday evening. It starts 14 years earlier, in a cafeteria at Atlanta University Center, at a scratched table by a window that faced the parking lot, where a 22-year-old law student borrowed a highlighter from the woman sitting across from him, and then kept talking for 3 hours as if she had agreed to listen. She had not agreed to anything, but she listened anyway. His name was Darius Calloway. He had grown up in Vine City, West Atlanta. His mother worked the front desk at a dental office on Joseph E. Lowry Boulevard. His father had been gone since Darius was 9, not dead, just gone. The kind of gone that sends a birthday card 2 years running and then stops without explanation. Darius had decided at 11 that he was going to be a lawyer. Not because anyone told him he could be, because no one had told him he couldn't yet, and he was smart enough to start running before they got around to it. He was sharp, he was driven, and in those early years, before success began billing him for it, he was genuinely kind. Her name was Simone Ellison. She was 19 and studying nursing, and she had cheekbones that caught light the way a blade catches light, and a mouth that people noticed before she even opened it. Her skin was the color of honey left in the sun. Deep and warm. Her hair fell in long, loose curls past her shoulders, natural and full, the kind of hair that moved when she moved and did not apologize for taking up space. She was the kind of beautiful that made people assume her life was easy. It was not easy, but she carried it that way. Upright, with the particular dignity of a woman raised by someone who believed that how you walk into a room matters as much as why you entered it. That someone was Ruth Ellison, her grandmother. Simone's parents had both worked long hours, and Ruth had been the constant, the one who was home when school let out, the one who made sure there was food in the house, and a lamp on at night, and someone sitting at the kitchen table when the door opened. Ruth lived in a house on Dill Avenue in southwest Atlanta that she had owned outright since 1987. 2 bedrooms, a garden in the back that produced more tomatoes than any household of her size needed. A kitchen that smelled like smothered pork chops on Sundays and pine sol on Saturdays, and something warm and unnameable every other day of the week. Ruth was 70 when Simone first brought Darius to Sunday dinner. She watched him eat, watched him talk, watched the way he looked at her granddaughter when Simone was not looking back. Then she pulled Simone into the kitchen and said quietly, close to her ear, "That man is going to need a lot before he figures out what he has." Simone laughed. She should have asked a follow-up question. Instead, she married him at 26, in a small ceremony at Greater Ebenezer AME Church on Ralph David Abernathy Boulevard. 40 people. Sweet potato pie and lemon cake from Busy Bee Cafe on Martin Luther King Drive. Darius's mother in the front row. Ruth in the second row, wearing her good hat, saying nothing. And then Simone Ellison became, in every way that mattered, the engine of someone else's forward motion. It started small, the way these things always start small. Darius needed used textbooks for his second year. She covered them, pulled the money from the envelope she kept in the bedside drawer for emergencies and refilled it later, the way she always refilled it. Because she was the kind of person who maintained systems, who showed up prepared, who did not wait for someone else to handle the practical things. Then Darius failed the bar exam. First attempt. Not by much, but enough. He came home that evening and sat in the kitchen without turning the lights on. She found him there in the dark, did not ask about the exam, sat down across from him, asked if he was hungry. He was. She made smothered chicken and rice from the recipe her grandmother had written on an index card and taped inside the cabinet door. Set the plate in front of him. He ate, then looked up and said, "I need the prep course, the intensive one. It's $1,400. She did not flinch. She did not say, "But what about my knee?" Her left knee had been bothering her for 3 months. A minor surgical procedure, her doctor had said. Routine. But the timing never seemed right, and the money never seemed available, and she was young enough that she could manage the discomfort if she moved carefully on long shifts. She called the surgeon's office the next morning and pushed the appointment back 6 months. The $1,400 came from 3 places. $400 from her personal savings, $600 from the emergency envelope, $400 from a woman on Campbellton Road who had been inquiring about her mother's pearl earrings for 2 years. She drove to the jewelry shop on Auburn Avenue, sat in the car for 11 minutes, went inside, laid the earrings on the glass counter, signed the receipt, walked out, did not look back. Darius passed the bar on his second attempt. He called her from the parking lot of the testing center and his voice broke in the middle of saying her name. She was standing in the hallway of their apartment on Lee Street, and she pressed her free hand flat against the wall. Not from sadness, from the weight of relief. The feeling of something you have been carrying for a long time finally finding the ground. She cried harder than he did. She threw him a party in that apartment. 20 people. Store-bought cake from Publix on Cascade Road with his name in gold frosting. He stood on the coffee table because the room was too small to see him from the floor, and he said, in that voice of his that filled spaces before he even turned it up, "This woman gave up things I didn't know she was giving up. Whatever I build, she built first." She believed him. She believed him for years. She believed him through the first firm, a mid-sized practice off Peachtree Center Avenue that paid well and felt like a rival. She believed him through the second firm on West Paces Ferry Road in Buckhead, where the suits got better and the client dinners got longer, and she started attending events where she knew the caterers better than the guests. She believed him through the morning he told her he was opening his own practice, Calloway Law, and she stood on the sidewalk in Midtown and looked at his name in the glass and felt something rise in her chest that was pride and also something else, something she did not name yet. She went to work her shift at Grady, came home to an empty house. The silence had started by then. Not the comfortable silence of 2 people who know each other well enough to sit without noise. The other kind. The silence that happens when someone has made a decision and is waiting for the right moment to say it out loud. The silence that lives in the gap between what is true and what is still being performed. Darius was performing. Performing husband. Performing gratitude. Performing the man who had stood on a coffee table and told 20 people that she had built him first, and he was getting worse at it. The evenings disappeared. Then the conversations. Then the small things. The hand on her back when they walked into a room. The way he used to find her eyes across a crowd, like he was checking that she was still there. Gone. All of it quietly, without announcement, the way furniture moves out of a house at night. You wake up and the room looks different, and you cannot immediately name what is missing. She noticed. She was a woman who noticed things. She noticed the wedding ring stopped appearing on his left hand in November. He said it irritated his skin. She said nothing. She noticed the joint savings account was lower than it should have been in December. She called the bank and was told the authorized signatory status had been updated. She noted this in the way she noted concerning information on a patient chart, without reaction, with the specific attention of someone gathering data before drawing conclusions. She noticed Renata Ose. Renata appeared in their lives the way expensive problems appear, introduced as a business consultant, described as helping with the Kingston litigation account. She moved through rooms the way women move through rooms when they have decided in advance that every room belongs to them. 36 years old, high cheekbones, clothes that were always pressed and always correct. The kind of composure that is not natural but is so thoroughly practiced that the difference is no longer visible. She had a voice that had never once asked permission for anything, and eyes that assessed every situation for its utility before committing to an expression. She was not a woman who had stumbled into Darius Calloway's life. She was a woman who had studied it first. Simone met her in March at a gala at the Biltmore, Atlanta. 200 people, candlelight, Darius in a new suit he had not mentioned buying. He walked in with Renata 3 steps ahead of Simone. Not dramatically, just naturally. The way you walk with the person you have already decided is primary. Simone stood inside the entrance with her clutch in her hands and watched them cross the room. Something locked into place, not new information. Just information that had been assembling itself for months and had now found its final configuration. She stood at that gala for 2 hours, held a glass of water, smiled at the correct intervals. Darius introduced her to 4 people and did not introduce her to 9 others. Renata stood close to him all evening and never once made eye contact with Simone. That was the tell. Women who are not doing anything wrong make eye contact. On the drive home, Simone looked out the window. Darius drove with one hand. His phone lit up twice on the console between them. He did not reach for it, did not need to. The fact of it was enough. She kept looking out the window. She was not a woman who performed her pain. Ruth had taught her that, not with instruction, with example. The way Ruth had stood at her husband's funeral in a pressed dress, and held every hand extended to her and driven home, alone, and only then allowed herself 20 minutes on the kitchen floor before getting up and making dinner. Dignity, Ruth always said, is not the absence of feeling. It is the choice about what you do with it. Simone chose to keep working, and she kept noticing. She came home from a double shift in December and found Renata's business card on the kitchen counter. No explanation offered, none requested. She picked it up, set it down, went upstairs and changed out of her scrubs. She started pulling the property documents from the filing cabinet in the second bedroom, slowly, one folder at a time. Over several evenings after shifts, while Darius was still at the office or at dinner, or wherever he was in the hours he no longer accounted for, she was looking for something she hoped she would not find. She found it on a Sunday afternoon in January. A refinancing agreement, 3 pages. Her signature on line 11. She remembered signing it. Darius had put it in front of her at the kitchen table one Sunday morning 8 months ago, told her it was routine. A restructuring of the mortgage, better interest rate, would save them money. She had been coming off a night shift. She had read the first page, skimmed the second, signed where he pointed. She sat at that kitchen table now and read every word of all 3 pages. Her name had been removed from the deed, not forged, technically executed, through a legal mechanism that required her signature on one document and a series of subsequent filings she had never seen. Clean, precise. The work of someone who understood property law, the work of a lawyer. She sat very still. Outside, a car alarm went off on the street and then stopped. A neighbor's dog barked twice. A train moved somewhere in the distance on a fixed track, indifferent to everything happening inside this house. She placed the document back in the folder, closed the filing cabinet, went upstairs. She stood at the bathroom mirror, a black dress for the administration meeting she had that morning. Heels, her hair down, curls full past her shoulders. She reached for the small gold pin on the edge of the sink, a nursing pin, worn at the edges, simple. Her mother had pressed it into her palm on graduation day without a word, because some moments do not need narration. Darius appeared in the doorway behind her, already dressed, briefcase in hand. He looked at her the way you look at something you have already made a decision about. She clipped the nursing pin onto her dress, looked at her own face in the mirror. He said, "You working tonight?" She said, "I'm always working." He nodded, left, the front door closed, quiet. She looked at herself for a long moment, at the pin, at her own eyes looking back. She did not cry. She went to her meeting. That evening he came home early. That alone should have registered as a warning. He never came home early anymore. He was carrying a manila folder. He walked into the living room where she sat with a cup of tea and set the folder on the coffee table. Did not sit down, just stood there with his hands loose at his sides, waiting. She looked at the folder, then at him. She opened it. Divorce. She read the first page, set it down. You've already done it, she said. What? The accounts, the deed. You did all of it before you handed me this folder. He was quiet. How long ago did you decide, Darius? He looked at the window. You didn't do anything wrong, Simone. That is not what I asked. Some things cost more than you think. That's all. She looked at him. 14 years, she said. She did not raise her voice. Did not need to. I sold my mother's earrings. I pushed back surgery twice. I signed things you put in front of me because I trusted you. She paused. I trusted you. He turned from the window. Something moved across his face. Not guilt exactly. Discomfort. The discomfort of a man who had expected this conversation to go differently and was now recalculating in real time. You'll receive a settlement, he said. It's structured fairly. She almost laughed. She stood up, picked up her cup of tea, walked to the kitchen, set it in the sink, rinsed it, dried her hands on the dish towel by the stove. The one she had bought at the market on Edgewood Avenue because the pattern reminded her of something her grandmother used to have. She came back to the doorway. Don't be here when I come home tonight, she said. We'll communicate through attorneys going forward. That seems to be the language you prefer. She picked up her bag and her keys and walked out of her own house. She sat in her car on the street for a while, not thinking, not yet, just sitting, waiting for her body to catch up with what her mind already understood. After a while she reached for her phone. Claudette Monroe. 12 years of friendship. Clark, Atlanta, sophomore year. A friendship built through bad decisions and good coffee, and the kind of honesty that only works between women who have seen each other at their worst and showed up anyway. She dialed. Claudette answered on the second ring. Simone. Her voice was already careful, already braced, which was information. He gave me the folder, Simone said. He moved everything, Claudette. The accounts, the deed. All of it was already done before he handed me the papers. Silence. Not the silence of someone processing new information. The silence of someone who already knows. Claudette. Simone. Her name in Claudette's mouth pressed thin. There's something I have to tell you. The air in the car did not change. The street outside did not change. But something inside Simone's chest went very still. He came to me in October, Claudette said. Darius. He told me what he was planning. He said he needed me to stay quiet. He said if I told you, he would make things difficult for me with the lease situation and my mother's hospital situation. And I was behind on everything and I was scared and she stopped. He gave me money. $18,000. I took it. Simone, I took it and I said nothing for 4 months. And how long? Simone said. Flat, quiet, a door swinging open. October. 4 months. 4 months. 4 months of Sunday phone calls. 4 months of birthday texts and restaurant recommendations and the daily texture of a 12-year friendship, running parallel to a secret every single day. Simone, I'm so sorry. I should have. I'll call you later, Simone said. She ended the call, put the phone face down on the seat beside her, looked through the windshield at the house. The lights were on inside. She could see Darius moving past a window, still in his jacket, phone to his ear, conducting business, managing the next thing. Already past this. She thought about Ruth, about a woman who had sat at a kitchen table in Southwest Atlanta and signed a document she trusted because someone she loved had put it in front of her, about how easy that was, how reasonable it seemed, how little it took for a signature to become something you could not undo. She thought about the nursing pin on her dress, worn at the edges, still holding. She started the car. She drove west toward West End Atlanta, toward an apartment she had not yet rented, toward a life she had not yet begun to build, toward a version of herself that existed just past the edge of everything she could currently see. She did not know yet what was waiting for her there. She did not know about a woman named Josephine Hargrove, did not know about a piece of land her grandmother had sold in 2015, believing she was doing the right thing, did not know that the person who had constructed the slow and careful dismantling of her marriage had also been the person who had handed Ruth Ellison a false appraisal and walked away with over $350,000 that had belonged to Simone's family. She did not know that 11 years ago, on a night shift at Grady Memorial, she had sat beside a frightened woman who would not give her name and read aloud from a book because a person alone in the dark deserves company. and she did not know that the woman in that room had spent 11 years looking for her, had found her 3 days ago, was going to be standing on the sidewalk outside her new building at 7:14 on a February morning. She did not know any of it. She just knew what she had always known, that she was Simone Ellison, that she had built things before, and she knew how to begin. She found the apartment on a Wednesday, 3rd floor, West End Atlanta, the kind of building that had been there long enough to have opinions about the neighborhood. Brick exterior, narrow hallway, a window in the kitchen that faced east so the morning light came in at an angle that hit the counter like something deliberate. It was not the house on Dill Avenue where her grandmother had raised 2 daughters and kept the lights on through 30 years of everything the city could throw at her. It was not the house on the street where she had lived for 8 years, where her name was now absent from a deed that still had her grandmother's handwriting somewhere in its original paperwork. It was small, it was hers, and that second thing mattered more than it ever had before. She signed the lease on a Thursday, moved in with 2 suitcases and a box of kitchen things on a Saturday. She did not ask Darius for help. She did not ask anyone for help. She drove 3 trips in her own car, carried everything up 3 flights of stairs herself, set her suitcases down in the empty bedroom, stood in the middle of the room for a moment, looked at the walls. Then she went back downstairs, drove to the Target on Metropolitan Parkway, and bought a frying pan. Not because she needed a frying pan urgently. The old one, the one she had used for 6 years to make smothered chicken and garlic shrimp and Sunday morning eggs, was still sitting in the kitchen of the house on the other side of the city. She could have asked for it, could have included it in the list of personal belongings her attorney was preparing. But she did not want it anymore. She wanted a new pan, one that had no history in it, no memory of a Sunday morning at a kitchen table where she had signed a document without reading it because she trusted the man who put it in front of her. She paid for the pan in cash, drove home, cooked eggs, they were just eggs, but she ate them at her own kitchen counter, in her own apartment, in the morning light that came in at the east-facing window, and they tasted like something she had not eaten in a long time, something she had made entirely for herself. The weeks that followed were not dramatic. That is the part no one tells you about the end of a long marriage. You expect fire. You expect the kind of grief that announces itself with weather. What you get instead is paperwork, silence, the strange domesticity of rebuilding a life one small purchase at a time. She needed a dish rack, a bath mat, a set of hangers that were not the wire kind. She bought these things methodically, without ceremony, the way you buy things when you are focused on function and have no patience left for anything that isn't necessary. She went back to work. Grady Memorial Hospital had been her anchor for 11 years. She had walked those floors through every version of her life. Through the early years of the marriage when everything still felt like possibility. Through the middle years when things had started to thin and she had told herself it was just the cost of building something. Through the last 2 years when she had learned to read her husband's silences the way she read a patient's chart. She walked those floors now as a woman in the process of becoming something she didn't have a name for yet. She did not tell her colleagues what had happened. She was professional and warm and present in the way she had always been. And she went home at the end of each shift and lay on her bed in the dark and let the ceiling be what it was and did not ask it to be anything else. Sleep came slowly at first. 3 weeks of lying awake at 2 in the morning, aware of the space in the bed that used to be occupied, aware of the absence of sound that used to bother her and now felt different. Not comfortable yet, just different. Like a room after the furniture has been rearranged. You keep reaching for things in the wrong place for a while. Then your body learns. She learned. She called Claudette on the 14th day, not because she had forgiven her. She hadn't. Not yet. Not fully. What she had done was separate the feeling from the fact. The feeling was still raw and tender, the kind of feeling that lives in your throat and makes it hard to swallow certain things. But the fact was that Claudette was a woman who had been scared and broke, and had made a choice she could not undo. And Simone, who had spent 11 years watching people in crisis make choices they could not undo, understood something about that. It didn't make it right. It just made it human. She called. Claudette answered on the first ring, which meant she had been waiting. "I'm not ready to talk about it," Simone said. "But I wanted you to know I'm all right." A long pause. Okay, Claudette said. Her voice was careful, held at a distance from itself. Okay, I'm here when you are, I know. She hung up. It was not forgiveness. It was an open door. The difference between those two things matters more than people think. She did not call Darius. She did not need to. His attorney had sent 3 emails by that point, each one politely dressed in legal language that meant essentially the same thing. Sign here and receive this, and let us all move on with our lives. Her attorney, a woman named Beverly Odom, who worked out of an office on Cascade Road and wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck like a declaration, had been equally clear. Don't sign anything yet, Beverly said, sitting across from Simone in a chair that had seen 1,000 versions of this conversation. There are irregularities. What kind? Beverly set a folder on the desk between them. The joint investment account was restructured 8 months before the divorce filing, not 4. He started earlier than you thought. She turned a page. The property refinancing, the deed transfer. All of this happened over a 14-month window. This was not impulsive, Simone. This was planned. 14 months. She had been sitting across from him at dinner for 14 months, sleeping in the same house, handing him his coffee in the morning. And for 14 months he had been quietly, methodically doing paperwork. Can we fight it? She asked. Some of it, Beverly said. There's a question about the original deed. Your grandmother's name appears in the property history in a way that may give us standing. I need to pull more documents. She looked up over her reading glasses. But Simone, I want you to be prepared. Even in the best case, this is going to be a long road. Simone nodded. She had been on long roads before. She left Beverly's office on a Tuesday afternoon in February. The weather was doing the thing Atlanta weather does in February, gray and indecisive. Not cold enough to commit to winter, and not warm enough to suggest anything hopeful. She walked to her car, sat in it. 14 months. She pressed her hands flat on her thighs, looked straight ahead. It was not grief she felt right now. Not exactly. It was something more specific. The feeling of having been a guest in a story someone else was telling, thinking you were the narrator, and finding out, at the last chapter, that you had been a minor character all along. That feeling. That particular, locatable feeling. She drove home. She did not know that the next morning would change everything. She did not know that she was about 16 hours away from the most unexpected conversation of her adult life. She did not know, because how could she? Some things do not announce themselves. Some things just arrive. The way that woman was about to arrive. Standing on the sidewalk outside her building, in the gray February morning like she had been there for years, and was simply waiting for Simone to notice her. It was 7:14 in the morning. Simone came down the stairs from the 3rd floor in her scrubs from the night shift, nursing pin on her chest, her bag over one shoulder, hair pulled back from her face but still full and curled at the ends. She had been on her feet for 12 hours. She had held a man's hand while he received news about his heart that changed the rest of his life. She had helped a woman fill out paperwork at 2 in the morning because the woman's hands were shaking too hard to hold a pen. She pushed through the building's front door and into the morning air, and there she was, standing beside a black Cadillac on the street. Silver locks pinned back from a face that had seen 72 years and looked like it had understood most of them. A coat. Simple cut. Nothing cheap about it, but nothing loud either. The kind of clothing that says I do not need to impress you and has not needed to for a very long time. She was looking directly at Simone. Simone Ellison, the woman said. Not a question. Simone stopped. Yes. My name is Josephine Hargrove. A pause sized just right. I have been looking for you for a very long time. Here is the thing about that sentence. It could have been frightening. A stranger, early morning, knowing your name, standing beside a car you did not recognize. It should have triggered the wariness that women carry in their bodies without being taught to carry it. But it didn't. Because Josephine Hargrove had a quality that is almost impossible to manufacture and very easy to recognize. The quality of a woman who has already been through the worst thing and is no longer afraid of anything smaller than that. Simone looked at her. Do I know you? She said. You did, Josephine said. A long time ago. You might not remember. A pause. Could we sit somewhere? I think this is a conversation that deserves to be sitting down. They went to the diner 2 blocks east, booths by the window, coffee that came fast and without ceremony. Josephine sat across from her and folded her hands on the table and looked at Simone with the direct, unhurried attention of someone who has been waiting long enough that a few more minutes means nothing. In 2010, Josephine said, "I was a patient at Grady Memorial Hospital, not under my real name. I was admitted under a false identity because there had been an incident involving my family. A threat. My nephew Aldrich had received information suggesting someone close to the family had arranged for me to be harmed. We did not know at the time who was involved or how close they were. So my family moved me, quietly, checked me in as someone else, kept security at the hall, told the staff nothing." Simone said nothing. She was listening the way she listened to patients, with her whole body. "I was not a cooperative patient," Josephine continued, and something at the corner of her mouth moved, not quite a smile. The ghost of one. "I was frightened. I was in pain. I refused most of the nurses who came in. I would not let them touch me. I was convinced that every person who came through that door was potentially connected to whoever had threatened me." She stopped. "Except one. The morning light came through the diner window. Simone's coffee sat untouched. She was young," Josephine said. "Night shift. She came in around midnight and I told her to leave and she said very calmly, 'All right.' She pulled a chair up just outside the door and sat there. Not to watch me, not to monitor me, just to be present. As if the idea of someone being alone in a dark room and frightened was simply not something she was willing to leave unchallenged." Simone was not breathing normally. After a while I heard her reading aloud, quietly, to herself, or maybe to me. I don't know, I was too proud to ask. Josephine's hands unfolded and refolded on the table. It was their eyes were watching God. I recognized it from the first paragraph. My mother had that book. My grandmother before her. A pause. I let her come inside. She stayed 4 nights, Josephine said. She read to me. She sat with me through physical therapy when the pain was bad enough to make me want to stop. She held my hand during 2 procedures that I was terrified of, and she did not make it into a performance. She just held it, as if that was the most natural thing in the world. Josephine looked directly at Simone. I offered her money. She refused. I offered her a gift. She refused. I asked her, on the 4th night, why she kept coming back, when she could have requested another assignment like every other nurse had done. And she said she stopped, waited, as if giving Simone a chance to remember. And Simone did remember, slowly. Would you treat them with kindness? The way you something that has been in the back of a drawer for years, and you find it when you're looking for something else and realize you never lost it at all. A room. A woman who would not look at her. A chair pulled up outside the door. A book. I said everyone deserves someone who stays, Simone said quietly. Even if you tell them not to. Josephine looked at her for a long moment. Yes, she said. That is exactly what you said. Simone looked down at her coffee, picked it up, set it back down without drinking it. I tried to find you, Josephine said. After I recovered, my family relocated out of Atlanta for 2 years while the investigation into the threat was concluded. By the time I came back, that wing of the hospital had been reorganized, staff reassigned. I had your first name. I had a physical description. It took me years, working through the hospital's records through other channels, to get to a full name. And by the time I had it, you had married and moved and, she paused. You were more difficult to find than I expected. That is not a complaint. That is simply what happened. What made you find me now? Simone asked. Josephine looked at her steadily. Because of what else we found, she said. And that was when Aldrich Hargrove walked through the diner door. He was 38, tall. The kind of man who moved through rooms with deliberate economy, no step wasted, no gesture unnecessary. He was carrying a leather portfolio under one arm. He slid into the booth beside his grandmother without preamble and set the portfolio on the table. Ms. Ellison, he said, I'm Aldrich Hargrove. I work with my grandmother. I oversee the legal and investment operations for Hargrove Holdings. He opened the portfolio. In 2019, he said, Hargrove Holdings acquired a parcel of industrial land south of Atlanta as part of a larger development project in that corridor. The acquisition was straightforward. The price was fair. The prior ownership history was what triggered the review. He turned a page toward her. In 2015, that parcel was sold by a woman named Ruth Ellison. Simone went completely still. The sale price was $52,000, Aldrich said. The land was appraised by a broker at that figure. The broker represented to Ms. Ruth Ellison that rezoning changes in the area were imminent and would significantly reduce the land's value, which was why an immediate sale was advisable. He looked at Simone directly. None of that was true. The zoning changes being described did not exist. The appraisal was conducted by an agent working in conjunction with the broker. The land's actual market value in 2015 was $410,000. The diner noise continued around them. Plates, voices, a spoon against the side of a mug. The broker's firm, Aldrich continued, and here he paused in a way that carried weight, was called O.C. & Wells Financial Consulting. Simone heard the name. She heard it and did not react outwardly, because the outward reaction was still assembling itself somewhere behind her sternum, working through the layers of what that name meant, what it connected to, what it explained. Osei, Renata Osei. We discovered this during a routine audit of the acquisition's ownership chain last year, Aldrich said. When the audit team flagged the irregularities in the 2015 transaction, we pulled the full file. It became clear that your grandmother was the victim of a deliberate scheme. She was presented with false information under conditions designed to create urgency and fear, and the transaction was executed quickly to prevent her from seeking independent counsel. She thought she was protecting me, Simone said. Her voice was flat, not emotionless, just very controlled. From what we were able to piece together, yes, Aldrich said. The funds from the sale were used in part to support your household and your husband's professional costs at the time. She thought about that land, about Ruth signing papers at the kitchen table on Dill Avenue, about a woman who had survived everything and who had believed, right up until the end, that she had done right by the people she loved. The restitution, Aldrich said, and he turned to another page, accounts for the original loss, adjusted for market appreciation over 9 years, and the opportunity cost of the investment value foregone. The figure is $1.6 million. He let that sit. Additionally, Josephine said, and her voice was quiet now, quieter than it had been, I would like to offer you an equity position in the Hargrove Community Fund, which is our community investment arm, and a leadership role. Director of Community Investment, because the work you do, the work you have always done, caring for people who need someone to stay, that is not a small thing, and I would like to see it have real resources behind it. Simone looked at the numbers on the page. I did not stay in that room because I expected anything, she said. I know, Josephine said. I stayed because it was the right thing to do. I know that too. Josephine reached across the table and put her hand over Simone's, which is precisely why this money belongs to you. They sat there for a moment. The diner went about its business around them. Simone looked at Josephine's hand on hers, thought about a woman who had refused to let her into a hospital room on a night shift 11 years ago, thought about a chair pulled up outside a door, a book. 4 nights, hands held in the dark during procedures that hurt. She thought about Ruth. She thought about the land, about what her grandmother had signed away believing she was doing something necessary, about the fact that the person who had taken it, the person who had constructed the whole apparatus of that theft, had also been sitting in her living room for the last year, attending her dinner parties, touching her husband's arm. Tell me about O.C. & Wells, she said. Aldrich closed the portfolio, opened it to a different section. Renata O.C., he said, has a professional history that is consistent across multiple transactions. She identifies targets, typically men in positions of financial growth or transition, builds a professional relationship, and assists them in restructuring assets in ways that obscure origin points. In exchange, she receives a fee arrangement that is never formally documented. A pause. Your husband was not the first. He was one of at least 4 we have been able to identify. She didn't come into our marriage by accident, Simone said. No. She identified Darius approximately 2 years before she made formal contact. She tracked the growth of his firm, his client list, the size of the assets she could help him move, and the land. The land, Aldrich confirmed, was a separate transaction, but the same operator. We believe it was flagged as an opportunity when she was conducting due diligence on your household's financial profile in preparation for approaching your husband. She saw the land in the background of the family's asset history, made a move on it separately, likely through a different front, before the approach to Darius was formalized. She had taken Ruth's land first, then she had taken Darius. Then she had helped Darius take everything else. Simone looked at the table for a moment, at the wood grain, at the ring her coffee cup had left on the surface. She said very quietly, I want to know what can be done. Aldrich looked at her. For the first time since he had sat down, something shifted in his expression. Not sympathy exactly, something closer to respect. We have already been in contact with the Georgia Bar Association, he said. The evidence in the billing records from Darius's firm is separate from the land issue, but it corroborates a broader pattern. And our legal team has flagged Renata Ossi's transactions to the appropriate financial regulatory bodies. He paused. We are not the only people looking for her. Is she findable? Simone asked. She is very good at not being found, Aldrich said. But she is not as invisible as she believes she is. They left the diner an hour later. Simone stood on the sidewalk in the gray February air with Josephine beside her, and the Cadillac at the curb, and Aldrich on his phone a few feet away, and she thought about what 14 years looked like from the outside. From the outside, it probably looked like a lot of things. A marriage, a career, a house in the kind of neighborhood that people describe as nice, a woman who took care of everyone else and appeared to be doing fine. From the inside, it looked like a frying pan, a new one, bought with your own money. Used to cook eggs you ate alone by a window that faced east. 2 days later, the cars appeared in front of Darius's house. Not 20. 6. But 6 was enough. 6 black vehicles with a police escort on a residential street in a neighborhood where the most dramatic thing that usually happened was someone's sprinkler system malfunctioning. 6 vehicles stopped together draw a crowd, and the crowd drew phones. And the phones drew the particular attention of a city that had been watching Darius Calloway's name move up the ranks for years, and was now watching something else happen entirely. Simone arrived in the Cadillac with Josephine. She was not in scrubs. She was not dressed for a shift. She was wearing a burgundy dress that fit the way clothes fit when you have stopped dressing for anyone else. Heels. Long curls loose and full past her shoulders. The nursing pin was not on her today. This was not a day for the nursing pin. She stepped out of the car onto the street she had lived on for 8 years. The neighbors were already outside, watching from driveways and front steps with the barely concealed attention of people who are pretending to check their mail. Darius was on the porch, robe, coffee, the posture of a man who was very good at looking unbothered, and who was, for the first time, genuinely bothered. Renata was beside him, pressed, polished, not a hair out of place, because of course she wasn't. Simone walked to the foot of the steps and looked up at both of them. She did not look at them together the way she had looked at them at the Biltmore, from across a ballroom, with a glass of water in her hand, and something locking shut in her chest. She looked at them the way you look at a situation that has been fully understood. Darius came down the steps. 1, 2. Stopped. Simone. His voice was trying for control and landing somewhere short of it. What is this accountability? She said, simply, like it was a word she used every day. Who is that woman? Someone I helped a long time ago, without knowing I was helping anyone at all. He looked at Josephine, looked back at Simone. Something was moving behind his eyes, calculating the way lawyers calculate, running the variables, trying to find the argument that works. We can talk about this, he said. Come inside. We can sit down and talk about this privately. And there it was, privately. The thing he had always wanted. The thing men like him always want. The conversation kept inside the house, the terms managed, the narrative controlled. We had 14 years to talk, she said. Her voice was steady, not warm, not cold, just clear, the way water is clear when there's nothing in it. You made a different choice. So did I, Simone. He took another step. I was wrong, I know that. I can make this right. We can tear up the papers, we can start again. Please just don't, she said. One word, placed exactly where it needed to be. He stopped. I'm not angry with you anymore, Darius, she said. I'm not now. What I am is done. And those two things are not the same, and I need you to understand that. He looked at her. She looked back. Then she turned to Aldrich, who was standing beside the car with the portfolio under his arm, and she said quietly, just for him, let's go inside and do what we came to do. From the porch, Renata watched all of this with an expression that was very carefully maintained, smooth, unreadable. The expression of a woman who knows how to stay ahead of a situation. But her eyes moved to Josephine Hargrove, and something in those eyes changed. Just slightly. Just enough. The microscopic recalibration of someone who has just realized that the variable they did not account for has arrived. Josephine looked back at her. Didn't say a word. Didn't need to. That evening, Renata Osei cleared out the closet she had been filling for 8 months in the house on Darius's street. Folded everything, took what mattered, left nothing else. No note, no goodbye, no explanation of any kind. Because Renata Osei had always understood that the cleanest exit is the one that leaves nothing to read. Then she left. No forwarding address, no goodbyes, no drama. Because Renata Asse had always known that the exit is the most important part. You plan it first. You execute it cleanly. And you never ever stay long enough to become a casualty of what you set in motion. She was already on a flight by the time Darius read the note. He stood in his kitchen, in his robe, in the house that was becoming increasingly difficult to describe as his, and held that piece of paper, and understood, perhaps for the first time, what it felt like to be left behind by someone who was never really there. Simone was in her apartment when her phone rang that evening. Beverly Odom, her attorney. I pulled the original deed, Beverly said, without preamble, which was the thing Simone had always appreciated about her. The one your grandmother recorded when she transferred the property to you and Darius as a wedding gift. And? A pause. It was never updated, Simone. Her original deed still has your name on it. The refinancing he did, it was executed against a subsequent document. But the original conveyance, the very first deed, with Ruth Ellison's signature on it and your name as a joint tenant, that document was never superseded. Simone sat down on the edge of her bed. What does that mean? She said. It means, Beverly said slowly, that every subsequent document Darius signed removing your name may be technically invalid. The original deed may still be controlling, which means you may never have lost ownership of that house. A long quiet. My grandmother, Simone said. She put your name on it the way grandmothers put names on things, Beverly said, and there was something almost gentle in her voice. Permanently. Without question. Without imagining anyone would ever try to take it back. Simone pressed her free hand against her knee, the one she had pushed back surgery on twice, the one that still ached on cold mornings. She sat in her apartment in West End, Atlanta in the dark, and thought about Ruth Ellison, who had sold a piece of land she had inherited from her mother in order to help a granddaughter she had loved more carefully than she had ever said out loud, who had signed papers at a kitchen table without knowing they were worth 10 times what she received for them, who had died in 2017, believing she had done the best she could with what she had, who had put Simone's name on a piece of paper in 1994 and never taken it off, because that was the thing about Ruth Ellison. She made decisions once, she made them from the right place, and she did not unmake them. Yes, what do we do next? And Beverly Odom, who had been a family law attorney in Atlanta for 22 years, and who had seen a great many things unfold in a great many directions, said, "We go get your house back." Simone looked at the east-facing kitchen window across the apartment. Dark now. Morning was hours away. But it would come. It always came. She thought about a nursing pin on the edge of a sink, about a woman on a sidewalk who had been looking for her for 14 years, about a piece of land and a piece of paper, and a grandmother who had put her name somewhere that no one, not a broker with a false appraisal, not a lawyer with a calculated plan, not a woman with a polished exit strategy, had ever managed to remove. Some things, she was beginning to understand, cannot be taken, because they were never held loosely in the first place. They were held the way Ruth held things, with both hands, with intention, with the kind of love that signs its name and does not come back later to cross it out. The Georgia Bar Association opened its investigation on a Monday. Darius found out the way people find out about things they have been dreading. Not in a single moment, in pieces. An email from a colleague that arrived at 6 in the morning, with a subject line that asked if he had seen the notice. A voicemail from his firm's managing partner that used the word irregularities twice in 40 seconds. A text from a client he had represented for 4 years that said simply, and without any additional context, "We need to pause our engagement pending clarification." He stood in his kitchen reading these things in the order they arrived. Still in his robe. Coffee going cold on the counter behind him. The kitchen that had once had another woman's coat hanging by the back door, and a note on the counter that said this was business, nothing more. The coat was gone. The note was gone. The woman was gone. What remained was the paper trail, billing records from the Kingston litigation account, 14 months of them, fees charged for work that had not been performed, consultancy arrangements that existed on paper and nowhere else, hours logged against client funds that had been, when examined carefully, redirected through a network of transactions that looked simple until you pulled on one thread and watched the whole thing come apart. Every document had his name on it. Every single one, not Renata's, not the name of any associate, not a forged signature or a borrowed identity, his name, because he had believed, in the particular way that people believe things when someone very competent is handling the details, that his name on the documents was a formality, that the substance was elsewhere, that he could have the distance of plausible deniability while also having the benefit of what the arrangement produced. He had been wrong about that. He had been wrong about a number of things. The investigation was not the worst part. The worst part was the sequence that followed it. The clients who left. Not dramatically, one by one. The way guests leave a party when the evening has turned and no one wants to be the last one standing in an empty room. 4 in the first week. 3 more in the second. The managing partner called a meeting that Darius attended alone and came out of looking like a man who had stepped off a curb he didn't see coming. His name appeared in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution on a Thursday. Local attorney under investigation, financial irregularities, Kingston litigation account. He read it on his phone sitting in a parking garage on Peachtree Street, and then put the phone face down on the passenger seat and sat in the dark for a long time. He thought about the coffee table he had stood on years ago in an apartment on Lee Street, telling 20 people that the woman who had built him deserved every piece of his future. He thought about the folder he had set on the coffee table in the living room, and the way she had looked at it, and then at him, and then picked it up without any of the reactions he had expected. No tears, no scene, no performance. Just that voice, even and clear and final. We can discuss details through attorneys. That seems to be the language you prefer. He sat in the parking garage until the automated lights clicked off and left him in the dark. He did not call anyone. There was no one left to call. Claudette Monroe showed up at Simone's apartment on a Saturday morning without calling first. That detail mattered, because Claudette had always been a person who called first, even in college, even for impromptu visits. Even when she was already standing in the hallway outside your door, she would call to say she was there. It was a courtesy she had never dropped. A small, consistent thing. The kind of small, consistent thing you only notice when it changes. She did not call, she knocked. Simone opened the door in her off-day clothes, a fitted loungewear set, hair loose, curls falling past her shoulders the way they fell when she stopped managing them for other people. She looked at Claudette, took in the fact of her being there, the fact that her hands were not empty, a white envelope. Claudette held it out without speaking first. Her eyes were doing the thing eyes do when a person has already rehearsed a speech and then decided at the last moment that the speech was wrong. I never touched it, Claudette said. Simone looked at the envelope. Every dollar, Claudette said. I put it in a separate account the day after I deposited it and I never transferred it out. I don't know why exactly. Maybe because spending it would have meant I'd decided something I didn't want to have decided. She paused. Or maybe because some part of me knew that keeping it intact was the only thing I could do right. Simone took the envelope, held it. $18,000. In a cashier's check, made out to Simone Ellison. Because Claudette had gone to the bank and done that specifically. Made it formal. Made it an act rather than a gesture. I know it doesn't fix it, Claudette said. No, Simone said. It doesn't. I know saying I was scared is not an excuse. It's not an excuse, Simone said. It's just true, and I've been trying to work out the difference between those two things. A long pause. The hallway was quiet. Somewhere below a door opened and closed. Come in, Simone said. Not warmth yet, not the full restoration of 12 years of friendship in a single Saturday morning, but a door opened, a direction chosen, which sometimes is exactly the right amount. Claudette stepped inside. They sat at the kitchen counter and drank coffee in the east-facing morning light, and did not talk about Darius or money or the 4 months of silence. They talked about Claudette's mother, who was improving. They talked about a movie they had both seen years ago and disagreed about then, and still disagreed about now. They talked the way women who have known each other for a long time talk, when they are rebuilding something carefully, one ordinary sentence at a time. The envelope sat on the counter between them. Neither of them mentioned it again. By the time Claudette left 2 hours later, something had shifted, not back to what it had been, forward, to whatever came next, which was different but not lesser, just shaped differently. The way everything that survives a hard thing gets shaped differently by having survived it. The auction was announced in March. Beverly Odom called Simone on a Tuesday morning with the specifics. The house, which Beverly now believed Simone had never fully lost legal claim to through the original deed, was nonetheless being listed for sale as part of the resolution of Darius's financial obligations. The original deed argument was still working its way through the legal process. Beverly was confident, but confident was not the same as concluded. You could wait for the ruling, Beverly said. How long? 6 to 8 months, maybe more. Simone looked at the east-facing window. What's the alternative? Bid at auction. Establish possession through purchase. The deed ruling, if it comes through in our favor, would then serve as additional legal confirmation rather than the primary mechanism. If I bid, Simone said, I want to do it with my own money. Beverly was quiet for a moment. The restitution from Hargrove Holdings is your money, Simone. I know. I mean the money I've made since February, the salary I've drawn since February. From the fund and from Grady. She paused. I want to buy that house with what I earned, not with what I was owed. Another pause. That's a distinction that matters to you, yes. All right, Beverly said. The auction was on a Thursday in late April. Morning. The venue was a commercial real estate office on Marietta Street that smelled like burnt coffee and ambition. Folding chairs in rows, a podium, a screen showing property images. 12 people in the room when Simone arrived, which was 3 minutes before it started because she was not a woman who arrived dramatically, but she was also not a woman who arrived early enough to make small talk. She wore a dress that was not burgundy this time. Darker, plum. The kind of color that is not trying to be noticed but gets noticed anyway. Heels, hair down, curls full and natural. No nursing pin. This was not a nursing pin occasion. This was something else entirely. She sat in the second row. She saw Darius when she sat down. He was in the back row. Not in a suit. Not in the clothes of the man who had stood on a coffee table on Lee Street or walked into a gala at the Biltmore with his hand on another woman's back. He was in dark pants and a button-down, and he looked like a man who had not been sleeping well, which he probably hadn't been. He was carrying a cardboard box. It took her a moment to understand what that meant. Then she understood. He had come to collect the last of what he had kept in the house. He had arranged it to coincide with the auction. Maybe because it was efficient. Maybe because he had wanted one more moment in the space that used to be his life. He saw her at the same time she processed his presence. Their eyes met across the rows of folding chairs. Neither of them looked away first. Neither of them looked away at all for a moment. They just held that across the distance, whatever it was. The compressed weight of 14 years. The specific silence of two people who have run out of things to say to each other and have arrived finally at the question of what to do with the quiet. Then the auctioneer called the room to order, and Simone turned around. The bidding opened at a number that was fair for the property and low for what the house represented to her, which was not its square footage or its location or its market position. What it represented was Ruth's handwriting on a piece of paper, a name put there in 1994 and never removed. A developer bid first. A company she did not recognize by name but whose representative, a man in a gray suit near the aisle, carried himself with the energy of someone who had already done the math and felt nothing about the outcome. He wanted the land more than the house. He wanted to remove the house and build something that would make the land generate income in a way that an existing single-family home could not. She knew this because Beverly had told her that there were at least 2 interested parties who intended to demolish the structure. She did not let her face do anything with that information. She waited. 3 rounds of bidding. The developer's representative going steadily. A second bidder dropping out after the second round. Simone making her first bid at a moment that felt to the room like someone who had been watching carefully and had chosen her moment. Because that is what she had done. Back and forth. Clean. 4 rounds. The developer's representative looked at her once, assessed, made a decision, bid again. He looked at her again. She did not look at him. She looked at the auctioneer. He bid again. She bid again, and then he stopped. A calculation made. A number reached past which the math no longer worked for what he intended. He set his paddle down, looked at his phone, made a note. And that was it. The auctioneer said her name, said the number, said the words sold, and brought his gavel down on the podium with a sound that was not particularly loud but that she felt through the floor of the room and up through the soles of her heels. She exhaled once, pressed her hands flat on her thighs, and then she stood up because there were forms to sign and a process to complete, and Simone Ellison had always been a woman who completed the process. She was walking toward the front table when she heard him behind her. Simone, she stopped, turned. Darius was standing between the rows of chairs with his cardboard box under one arm. Up close he looked worse than he had from across the room, not broken, just diminished. The diminishment of a man who had spent months watching everything come apart and still had to keep getting dressed in the morning. "I didn't know you were going to be here," he said. "I didn't ask you to know," she said. "I just started again. I came to get the last of my things. I know, I didn't think." He looked at the front of the room, at the auctioneer, at the table where she was about to sign the paperwork. "I didn't think you'd buy it. Why not?" He looked at her, a long look. "Because I thought you'd want to be done with it." She considered that for a moment. "Darius," she said, "I am done with it. Done with you. Done with the version of my life that centered on yours." She paused. "But that house has my grandmother's name in its history, and mine, and I'm not done with that." He looked at the floor. "I was wrong," he said, quietly, without theater. "Just a statement of fact arriving too late to change anything. I know you don't need to hear that. I know it doesn't, she said. "You're right. I'm sorry, Simone." She looked at him, and here is the thing. Here is the part that would have surprised the version of herself, who had sat in a car outside her house in January, and stared at the building without going back inside. She believed him. Not because it changed anything. Not because sorry was a transaction that produced a result she needed, but because she could see that it was true, that somewhere in the wreckage of everything he had carefully constructed, and then carelessly deconstructed, this particular thing, this particular word, was genuine. "I know," she said. And she turned and walked to the front table and signed her name. He was gone by the time she finished. She did not see him leave. She was not looking. Beverly Odom found her at the auction table and gripped her hand with both of hers and said, "Ruth would have something to say about this." "She would have said exactly 3 words, Simone said. "What 3? Simone smiled. The first full, unguarded smile she could remember producing in months. "About time, baby." 2 weeks after the auction, Beverly called with the ruling, the original deed, the one Ruth had recorded in 1994, the one with her handwriting and Simone's name, and the particular legal permanence of a grandmother who made decisions from the right place and did not unmake them. It had never been superseded. Every document Darius had signed in the 14-month window of his careful, planned reorganization of their shared life had been executed against a subsequent instrument that did not override the original conveyance, which meant, legally and finally and without further question, that Simone had been a rightful owner of that property from the day Ruth handed it to her. He had tried to take what was never fully his to take, and he had failed, not because of anything dramatic, not because of a courtroom confrontation or a scene or a moment of public reckoning, because a woman in Southwest Atlanta in 1994 had filled out a form correctly, and then never touched it again. Ruth Ellison, who had signed papers at her kitchen table and believed she was doing right, who had sold land she did not know was worth 8 times what she received for it, in order to take care of the people she loved, who had died in a house on Dill Avenue without knowing that the most important thing she ever did for her granddaughter was something she had done 30 years earlier in a county recorder's office, without ceremony, without knowing it would matter. But it had mattered. Everything had mattered. The Ruth Ellison Fund opened its doors on a Saturday in October. Not October the way Atlanta does October when summer is still arguing with the change of season. Actual October. The air with some weight to it. The light coming through the trees on the street at an angle that made everything look like a photograph someone took on purpose. The house had been repainted, not dramatically. A deep warm color that the neighbors had opinions about and then changed their opinions about once they saw it in the morning light. The rooms had been rearranged. The formal dining room that had once hosted a dinner party where Simone had been introduced as someone's former responsibility was now a counseling space. Wide table. Soft chairs. A window that faced the garden that she had planted in the spring mostly because she wanted to. Partly because the act of putting things in the ground and watching them grow had a particular quality of affirmation she needed that season. The front room became the welcome space. Comfortable, not institutional, not the kind of room that announces itself as a place where serious things happen, even though serious things happen there. The office in the back was Claudette's, office manager, which suited her because Claudette Monroe had always been the most organized person Simone had ever known, and had spent years deploying that skill in other people's interests and could finally deploy it in something that felt like it mattered at the right scale. They had not had a formal conversation about forgiveness. They had not sat down and accounted for everything and arrived at a clean resolution. What they had done was work alongside each other for 5 months, and argue about the filing system twice, and eat lunch together most Tuesdays, and in doing those things had rebuilt something that was not identical to what they had before, but was sturdy in a different way. The sturdiness of things that have been tested and repaired rather than untested and assumed. Josephine Hargrove came to the opening. She arrived with Aldrich and without ceremony, which was her preference. And she stood in the front room and looked at what the house had become, with an expression that Simone could not fully read. Something old in it. Something that had to do with the particular satisfaction of watching the right thing happen after a long wait. You named it for her, Josephine said. There was no other name, Simone said. Josephine looked around the room. At the women who had come. Not a crowd. Not a gala. The kind of gathering where people arrive because they need what is being offered, and the arrival itself is a kind of courage. She knew what she was doing, Josephine said. Your grandmother. Even when she thought she didn't. I think she always knew more than she said out loud, Simone said. That runs in the family, Josephine said. She pressed Simone's hand once. Then went to sit in the corner with a cup of tea and watched the afternoon unfold with the contentment of someone who has waited a long time for something and is not in any hurry to leave now that it has arrived. The woman came in late afternoon. She was 28 years old, and she came through the door the way people come through doors when they are not sure they are allowed to be there. Careful, a little sideways. One hand on the strap of the bag over her shoulder. The only bag she had brought because it was the only bag she had taken. She had left her apartment that morning with what fit in that bag, which was not much. But it was hers. And that mattered more than it sounds. Simone was the one who met her in the front room. Because Simone was always the one, in every space she occupied, who noticed the person who came through the door uncertain of their welcome. 11 years of nursing had built that into her body. The turn of the head, the reading of a presence. The understanding, immediate and without analysis, of what a person needed before they were able to ask for it. What this woman needed was simple. She needed someone to stay. Come in, Simone said. You're in the right place. The woman looked at her. Her eyes were doing the thing that eyes do when a person has been holding something very heavy for a very long time, and someone has just said something that makes the weight shift. I don't know where to start, she said. That's fine, Simone said. That's what we're here for. She walked her to the counseling room, the one that used to be a formal dining room where a dinner party had once proceeded around the woman who lived there as if she were furniture. The room was different now. Everything about it was different. They sat down across from each other. The woman talked, slowly at first, then less slowly. Not everything, not all at once, not the whole weight of whatever she had been carrying in that bag and in her body, just enough to begin, which is how beginnings work. Not all at once, just enough. Simone listened, the way she had always listened, with her whole self, without the part of her attention reserved for what she was going to say next, just present, just there. This was not a small thing. It had never been a small thing. After a while the woman stopped talking and looked at the table between them. She had a quality of stillness that was not peace but was adjacent to it, the stillness of a person who has just put something down and is registering the absence of the weight. Simone looked at the nursing pin on her own chest. She reached up and unclipped it, held it in her palm for a moment. The worn edges, the particular gold that had gone slightly warm with years of being close to a body. Her mother's hands on graduation day. Ruth in the second row in her good hat watching without speaking because some things don't need words. 11 years of Grady Memorial hallways. 4 nights in a room with a frightened woman who would not say her name. A chair outside a door. A book read aloud in the dark, everything the pin had witnessed, everything it had been present for. Every moment it had been clipped to her chest as a reminder of who she was when she needed reminding. She set it on the table between her and this woman she had just met. My mother gave me this on the day I graduated, she said. I've worn it every day I needed to remember something. A pause. I need you to have it now. The woman looked at the pin, looked at Simone. I can't take that, she said. You can, Simone said. Because that is how it works. Someone holds it until someone else needs it more. That's been the whole point. The woman reached out, slowly, picked it up, turned it in her fingers. The gold caught the afternoon light from the window. She pressed it against her palm, and something moved across her face. Something that had no single name. The way certain emotions don't have single names because they are made of too many things at once. Relief. Recognition. The sensation of being seen by someone who was not measuring her against what she had lost, but in the context of what you still are. She did not cry. She did not need to. She just held the pin and breathed. Later, when the afternoon had moved into early evening and the light outside had shifted to the blue-gray of dusk, Simone stood on the front porch of the Ruth Ellison Fund and watched the woman walk to the street. The nursing pin was on her jacket. She paused at the edge of the sidewalk, looked both ways. Something in her posture had changed from when she came in. Not dramatically, just in the way posture changes when a person has decided something, when they have picked a direction. She walked. Simone watched her until she turned the corner and was gone. Then she turned and looked at the house behind her, the color of it in the evening light, the garden she had planted in the spring, the windows lit from inside, where Claudette was probably still at her desk, making order out of something. Because that was what Claudette did when she was trying to be useful, and useful was what she needed to be right now. She thought about Ruth. About a woman who had sat at a kitchen table in 1994 and filled out a form and put her granddaughter's name on it without knowing that 30 years later it would be the thing nobody could take. About a woman who had sold land she loved for people she loved more, not knowing what the land was worth. Not knowing that the name on the form was worth everything. About a woman who had died in a house on Dill Avenue, having done right by her family in every way she knew how, and she had known more ways than anyone gave her credit for. The air had that particular October weight to it, the kind of air that makes you aware of your own body, of being in it, of the specific reality of standing on the porch of something you built, not built alone, not built without cost, but built. Simone had given a lot of things away in her life. She had given 14 years to a man who treated them as an advance against a future he never intended to share. She had given her mother's earrings to a man who wore the career they funded to events where she stood alone with a glass of water. She had given her energy and her time in 2 delayed surgeries and a signature on a document she should have read more carefully. She had given a lot, but she had also given things that came back. A nursing pin, given once and now given again. A name on a document that outlasted every attempt to remove it. 4 nights of company in a dark hospital room that traveled forward through 11 years and found her on a February sidewalk in the form of a silver-haired woman who said, "I have been looking for you for a very long time." Kindness does not always announce itself. Sometimes it just stays. And sometimes, years and years later, when you are standing on the porch of the thing you built from what was left, after someone tried to take everything, you understand that staying was the whole point, that it had always been the whole point. Simone turned and went back inside. The door closed behind her, quietly, without drama. The way doors close when a person is home. The Ruth Ellison Fund's lights stayed on well into the evening, warm and visible from the street, in the neighborhood that had watched a woman carry 2 suitcases out of a house and had not known then what she was walking toward. Now the neighbors knew. Some of them had already sent their sisters, their daughters, their friends who needed someone who would stay, and someone always did.